Well, welcome to Your Schools on Community 7 Television. I'm Shoots Veis and I'm your host. Each month we look at a different aspect of what's going on in Billings Public Schools. This month we're very excited to have Chris Malchuski with us. Chris is a transitions teacher. She works primarily out at the Career Center, but other places as well, and we'll talk to her all about that. Chris, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about Career Center, transitions, and all that good stuff, but before we do, let's talk a little bit about you and some history. Did you grow up in the area? Did you come to the area? Give us some background.
I came to the area, so I grew up back east. I'm from Long Island, New York, and went to school there, graduated college there. My brother at the time came out here to Montana and was attending Rocky, so I sort of visited him and my fiance at the time, and he and I really loved it. So we just stayed and started teaching, and 20-something years later.
Yeah, there you are. So when did you know you kind of wanted to get an education? That was something that you were interested in. Walk us through that process.
Yeah, I think I always was a teacher. I taught my brother in the basement kind of things with those old blackboards, and then in high school I worked with a class of students with special needs. I sort of was a peer tutor, and so at that time I decided, boy, I wonder what special education's about, and so that's really where I started.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so then when did you come to Billings Public Schools? Did you start there or did you come there? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I moved out right after college and just started subbing. I didn't really know that I would live here forever, but started subbing for a while in the district and just, really fell in love with Montana and the people, the community of Billings. And so I got hired at 23 years old, and I've been teaching in Billings ever since.
Did you start out at the Career Center or were you at some other schools first?
I started at Lewis and Clark. I've kind of have a trail of breadcrumbs following me around. So I started at Lewis and Clark, and then I went to senior high, and then I actually went down to Lincoln Center and taught adult education for a long time, which was really interesting. And through there, sort of made my way into this transitions program at the Career Center.
Sure. So when you came out to the Career Center, tell us a little bit about the Career Center and what it is, and then what kind of programs do you talk to us about? Transitions and maybe some math as well. So.
Sure. Yeah. So the Career Center it's really an eclectic building that we have in the district. Hopefully, more and more people are becoming aware of it. But it houses students from all three high schools. It's got, I think, the most impressive electives that students can take in our community. Everything from the medical field, engineering, mechanics, childcare. It just has a whole gamut of classes for students, including the core classes that students need. Almost all of them, not quite all. But so I teach a little bit of math, but then I also work in this specialized program called Transitions.
Okay. And we'll get into transitions in just a moment. So I know you said you kind of had always wanted to be a teacher, but I'm sure when you started you had expectations of what it was like to actually have your own classroom and be in charge of it, and then you actually had your own classroom and was in charge of it, and that was different. Tell us about what you expected it would be like to be a teacher and what you actually found then when you actually were in charge of that classroom.
Sure, yeah. I think, starting because I started out with students with special needs, it was extremely challenging emotionally. I worked with students, who just had some really basic needs originally, and then moved up to kids with learning disabilities, and so really felt frustrated with school. And so I think I expected that it was going to be engaging and exciting, and kids were going to love, school, and I found that sometimes students don't love school, that they have other needs, sometimes that come first. And so there was some illusions that had to be sort of, clarified a little bit. But in the end, I think that challenge of helping students to appreciate learning and education has kind of what's kept me in it for so long. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so talk to us about the transition program. What is it? What does it do? Give us kind of some history and background on the program.
Okay, so the transitions program again started originally at the Lincoln Center, and it came from the idea that the traditional classroom doesn't work for every student. And so we have kids who, for a whole slew of different reasons, the regular classroom just doesn't fit for them. It may be that they have some social anxieties and it's just too stressful to be in a packed room with, you know, all sorts of activity. It could just be a temporary thing. Maybe some kids are having surgery and have to miss school, and so to try to come back, you know, a couple days a week and get caught back up is really difficult. So in the transitions program, we use an online based program. However, it is an in-class classroom program. So they can work outside of class, but we still want students coming into the building. So I think about this whole COVID, you know, situation, and the students who worked remotely, and we don't want that. We don't want kids at home working and isolating themselves. We want them coming in and being as involved in school as they can. And so they work through these programs, these online programs, and I'm one of the teachers in the program. There's also an English history component, so I do the math and science, and the other teacher does the other two. And we just sort of work with these kids one-on-one as they get stuck or need help, or helping them to take notes and just kind of get comfortable with being in school.
Do you have teachers or administrators who kind of see the kids that maybe this is the right choice for them always or for now, and do they kind of recruit them into that, or do the kids recruit them? How does a kid kind of get to the program?
Right, yeah, that's a great question, and that's been kind of fluid for a while, but really the homeschool counselors will kind of notice that kids' grades are dropping, or parents communicate with those counselors so regularly that they may say, boy, this sounds like a kid who could use some specialized program. And so those counselors and deans will too, the associate principals will too, and they'll make a recommendation. They'll get a hold of, we have our lead counselor as well out at the Career Center who oversees our program. And so they get a hold of the counselor and set up an intake meeting, and we sit down with the parent and student and say, this is what it is, this is what it looks like, does it sound like it might be a fit for you? And you know, the kid kind of gets to decide from there, will this help me stay in school and you know, complete what I need to do.
And then do you have some metrics along the way? Hey, that sounds wonderful, but maybe it isn't wonderful 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road. Do you have kind of some metrics to check in with those kids over time to say, yeah, this is working pretty good, or this is not working at all?
We do, yeah, quite a bit. Some students realize, boy, I do like that social element of a regular classroom, and really our program is so intense. We have kids working on all different classes in the same class period. So, you know, the kids have to be dedicated. It's kind of like, I think of at the collegiate level when students do any kind of remote or you know, online class. And so, you know, some kids aren't ready for that. Reading levels have to be pretty solid because it's, you know, a lot of that individual one-on-one, being able to take notes but not over note take. So we at the end of each semester, we meet with kids and we say, how do you think it worked? Do you want to stay with us? This has been what we've noticed. You know, we could, and sort of come to an agreement there if they want to continue.
Now, are there, once you're in the transitions program, are you all the way in, or can I come for half a day and go to regular school for half a day? How does that work? Yeah,
we really don't want kids there all day because it's just so much computer screen. It's, you know, it's really a hard way. It's a hard way to do school. They build their abilities really well through the program, but we do want them to have some breaks from that kind of learning. So many of our students come and will be with us maybe for a class period and then go take a couple electives and come back for later in the day to do another one of their core classes. And we really only do the core classes, the English, the math.
What are the classes that I can take in transitions?
So basically any of those kind of core graduation requirements, your 4 years of English, your 2 or 3 years of math, we can, you know, do some electives, but with those subjects. So, you know, if a kid has already got their algebra and geometry, then they can do algebra 2, but as an elective. So, and then can they work at their own pace? Is there a certain pace they have to go? I mean,
if I'm a whiz at Algebra 2 and I could be done in 3 weeks or something. I mean, how does that pacing work?
Right, and we've seen that. We've seen some kids just fly through some of the curriculum and, really excel because, again, like you're saying, it's their strength.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a fine line. It's almost a little deceptive to kids to say it's at your own pace, because sometimes they're like, oh, well, I could do this in 4 years.
Yeah.
We still want them finishing at the end of the semester, but they can certainly work ahead and finish early. Some kids have gotten 2 classes done within the 1 class period. Just they can work a little bit from home, but again, still coming in to finish up with us and take their tests and. Yeah, keeping them accountable as best we can.
So if they're on that type of schedule, can they finish up school somewhat early then? Maybe be done a couple weeks before the other kids are done, or do they still need to be there for the same amount of time as the other kids?
And we try to let that be more of a parent decision. If the parent is okay with them being released, they finish their class, they've done the entire curriculum, and we can give them, a couple weeks to early summer. Then we can waive them, but we just have to be really careful.
Well, I would think it would be hard especially if they're taking some other classes, right? I'm sure you don't want them just coming in and I'm done, I don't have anything to do.
Right, exactly. So there are times where kids will come and then use our room if they do have a couple more weeks, but it's midday and they can't have that early out. They'll come and use it as sort of a study hall, bring in work from other classes, but it's not playtime when they finish. So
What about those students who, they get in, they think they're going to like it, but they don't? And how do they kind of have to commit to a semester, or after a couple weeks they're like, man, I thought I had it bad over here, but I don't really don't like this. Can I go back to my old school, or do I have to wait a whole semester? How would that work for a kid that's not doing well?
Right. Yeah. It's hard to. The curriculum that we have online doesn't really align perfectly with our classroom curriculum. So we always tell students, if you're not sure if you want to try this, it's easier to start in the regular classroom or the traditional classroom, and then move to us mid-semester. But that opposite really is hard to do. So they would have to, if they start with us, we can't really move them back into a classroom mid-semester. They've just missed too much of what their traditional.
So they kind of need to do a semester, and then then we'll release you back to what you were doing before.
Yeah. And usually, kids, they get that. They know it probably would be more work if they had to try to go back to the classroom and get caught back up on everything else they've missed. So they're usually okay with finishing up and then saying goodbye to us when it's done.
I know at the Career Center there's a fair amount of kids who do half the day there and half the day at their home school. Do you also have that in the transition programs where they're coming down there to do transition and going back to their home school for some other classes?
Yeah, we do. We don't have choir. There are just certain electives, especially at the Career Center, and some freshman classes that we don't offer. So we have kids who they just want to be in their band class, and so then they come to us the other part of the day.
And then could they do any of the transition stuff at their home school, or they need to be in the Career Center to do that?
The home schools have similar programs that they call their ILCs, Innovative, I think, Learning Center. It's just a different group of kids that they have, so they're welcome to be part of those ILCs if they don't want to have to come out to the Career Center. But often the kids that we have, they want that really quiet setting where we're really protective of our room. And myself and my coworker, we tell kids, we don't allow outbursts. We have kids who are really fragile, and so we try to protect that. And so a lot of the kids who come to transitions, they like that safe, setting. And so in the main buildings, they can't guarantee that as best as we can.
Do you have a lot of your kids who come to transitions and love it, and that's just kind of how they finish high school?
Yeah, we do. We get to see kids for a lot of years because of that. Freshman year, sometimes second semester, and really more recently we've even seen some come at the start of their high school career, and then to watch them graduate as as seniors and know that they stuck it out, and with some support from the program, it's really fun. It's really rewarding.
All right.
Yeah.
What did you guys have to change in the transitions program during the pandemic? Did you guys really have to change what you were doing, or was it pretty much business as usual?
We did have to change. For one, everything went to these 2-hour blocks, which was sort of painful. But and so these kids who potentially, in years past would come for half the day, now the entire day was, a half day. So we became a little bit more flexible with kids staying longer than we really like them to be in front of those computer screens. And to be honest, our numbers, they really were small. A lot of these students would like to be home if they can. And so a lot of our former students said, no, we're going to go remote. The pandemic is scary enough. And so we're hoping, that we'll get to see them again next year. So it affected our numbers for sure.
Sure. And then I know you're doing some transitions this summer as well. Is that for kids who are kind of needing to make up some classes that they missed? Is that primarily what you're doing over the summer?
So I'm doing summer school. Yeah, just the traditional high school summer school, and that's a little bit different than the transitions, because it's really not a select. Any kid who needs to recover some credits, and the district really did a nice job this summer. They opened it up for kindergarten through 12th grade, because because of just how strange this year of education has been.
Right. And then did you have a traditional classroom this year as well, and how did that go with the pandemic?
Yeah, I do. I teach a class of regular traditional geometry at the Career Center, and it was good. Yeah. It was as much as I guess anybody could expect. It's hard to do math every other week with kids, like cram for 10 hours this week, and then I'll see you again in 9 days once weekends have passed and all. So I think learning was affected, but kids are so resilient. They impress me. They show up. They, even when they're frustrated, they may voice that, but they show back up again the next day and keep working. And
how did you have to adjust how you were teaching to those kids, going from the I see you every day model to the I see you for a week, but I do get you for 2 hours? Were there changes that you made in your traditional classroom, just given the time block and the fact that you're not going to see them again for another week?
A lot of changes, it really, and some positive. I mean, there were positives to it. I really had to think about, what do I want these kids to know? Because I don't have that consistency to do a little bit of practice tomorrow and then a little more on Monday, and so it really became, all right, you guys, what part of this is good? What part are you getting? And maybe some of that is filler that isn't going to help you, as you move on to Algebra 2.
Absolutely. What is one thing that you wish students really understood before they take on the transitions program?
I think that balance, the hardest thing for kids for sure is that balance between being able to be an independent student and reading really independently and taking notes, and then even asking for help. So when you deal with some students who maybe have anxiety or some social struggles with that, they don't want us in their space or bugging them or checking in on them. They just want to be able to do it on their own. So kids have to be able to ask for help. And yet again, just that balance where they can also be somewhat independent and confident in their own abilities.
Do you see some students who grow in that over time? I mean, now that you're getting some that have been in there for a year, 2 years, 3 years, do they get to that point where they found that balance where, I like you to leave me alone, but I know I need to go to my teacher right now?
Every kid grows as a learner in it. It's amazing, really, to see, because it's tough. It's hard to do school that way. When you're young, college students, I think, are pretty competent and able to do that. And adults who go back to school, but for these young 14, 15, 16-year-olds, the growth in their ability to be independent learners is just impressive. It's really cool.
Right on. What is one thing you wish that parents knew about the transitions project or transitions process before their students went into it?
I think When I think about the students in the transitions program, I think parents, I mean, myself included as a parent, you know, we just want to protect our kids and provide them those safe places. And I think for some parents, they have to recognize that we want that for their kids too. So we're going to push them a little bit, but not to the point where, you know, we're being hard, or that we just really have been doing this for a while, and we know that they can get to where we the staff and the parents want their kids to be. So maybe just letting go of some of that nervousness and trusting the process a little bit.
All right. So when a student comes to you in transitions, how do you assess where they are really? I mean, sure, they can say they passed geometry, but how do you know, how do you assess where they are at and where they need to start from?
Right. Well, we just start with, you know, what credits they need. Basically, if you're a sophomore and you need English 2, we're putting you in English 2, and we just quickly figure out kind of where we can look at past scores, you know, reading scores or math scores.
Sure.
But really, it becomes something where we can tell just by the work they're putting in, and you know, their level of being challenged without getting overly frustrated, so it's really a work in progress. And
then do you guys do any sort of assessment during the course of the time that they're working on something, or is that all part of the program that's there saying, yep, they get this because they can do this, or is there some element of the teacher also doing some assessment?
Yeah,
well?
Both.
Yeah.
You know, it is embedded in the program, but I'll look at a quiz, for example, and if a student tried it a few times and finally got a passing score, and we have our passing score set at either 70 or 80%, you know, the district high schools do that as well, but you know, I might say, I don't think that was really solid, and so then I'll bring them back and we'll look over the information and, you know, just clarify, and usually the kids like, oh, okay, now I get that. I was sort of feeling that way, but so we have to kind of hover a little bit with some of that.
Sure. And then how do you do that final assessment too, as well as, you know what, that is Algebra 2 and they got it. How do you do that final assessment?
Just with the program, really. There's that final test embedded, and you know, we look at where their grades are, and there have been some instances where we'll give some written tests at the end that we score. So, you know, the questions that, you know, they're just kind of regurgitating information back isn't really what we want. So with the science class, I give them the written test instead, and just make sure that really they have that, you know, those common core concepts that we want students to know. Yeah.
How does the district decide what kind of programs and software is in use in transition? How do you assess, oh, this is a good program, this is not a good program? How do you figure out what you're going to use in the transitions classroom?
They've had teams of teachers across the district who use our online programs, and I think this is only our. Did we just finish our first year? Yeah, we just finished our first year with the current program we're using called Apex. So Grad Point was what we used in the past, and that one ended. And so a group of teachers, we all kind of got together and we just explored all these different options and tried to figure out what matched with, you know, what they're doing in the traditional classroom.
Yeah. You've probably touched on this a little bit, so but maybe expand on it. What are some of the least rewarding aspects of teaching the transitions program versus in an actual program or in an actual classroom?
The least rewarding. Well, you know, the engagement.
Difficult.
Yeah. You know, sometimes we end up not seeing kids anymore. You know, they decide that this route wasn't what they wanted to do, and maybe they do end up dropping out. And then, you know, it's a little disheartening because the kids have so much potential, and we really grow to get to know them and know, you know, what they can do. And so to see kids, you know, still continue to struggle that way is hard. And then that engagement, you know, in my traditional class of geometry, kids can goof around and they can do group work and build some learning with your peers, and so that missing element out of the transitions room is hard. But because these kids are all at their own pace, we've tried sometimes to say, hey, let's try learning this with a couple of you who are in the same class, but those who just work faster and those who work slower, it's just really hard to have any kind of interactions.
Yeah. So let's go to the opposite side of that coin. What do you find to be the most rewarding aspects of being in the transitions classroom?
Yeah, and so I guess just the counter to that would be those rewarding aspects. These kids who were just done with school, and then all of a sudden they're like, gosh, this is good, and I can do this, and I'm not dumb, and so that independence and that confidence that we see them build in themselves is just always what we look for. I think that's what we get in it for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Gaze into your crystal ball a little bit. What do you see coming in the next maybe 3 to 5 years in the transitions program that is really building upon what you're doing now and making it even a better program?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I worry about the transitions program. It's, it is a small program, and we always have budgets to consider, and I'm afraid that the crystal ball for the transitions program is just going to get kind of, smaller and smaller. I would like to, I know that the district values the program. I know they recognize that we have kids who need this kind of education. Budgets are just, they just drive more of what I wish they would. So, but if I could be optimistic, I guess I would say, that more people learn about what we are and what we do, and kids continue to find success with us. Yeah.
What about at the Career Center? What do you see coming to the Career Center, career and technical education? What do you see coming to that building out there and some of the programs that are in that building?
Gosh, I think we're busting at the seams. So I can't imagine that we won't grow that program.
Sure.
Or just the building itself. That it takes a lot of money to have a new facility, and but we really are to a point where we could use more classrooms, and kids want to be out there, and it's a lot when we hear that kids have to be turned away from electives they want because there's just no room.
Yeah.
So I think the Career Center is really good for our community. I think it's amazing for kids, and I hope that the community continues to support our schools and do what kids need.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for coming down and talking to us about transitions and the Career Center and the interesting aspect of it, and some of those students that this is the right solution for them. And I would also like to say thank you for all that you do for those kids and all that the teachers do. I know it was a tough year with the pandemic for all the teachers, so thank you for getting through it, and thank you for helping those kids.
Absolutely, we made it, and so the kids are amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.